This is a presentation of a really simple and reliable sales track that I've used for my entire career in insurance sales, but it's also applicable to any product or service that you want to represent as a professional salesperson. It's a very simple um, technique that involves 4 phases known as relax, disturb, relieve, and close. So the relax phase, which you undertake with a prospect, is to get them to the position where they're going to listen to what you suggest, but also that they will tell you the things that you need to know to give them good advice and to take them through how your product will solve that issue. And techniques are brand marketing, your personal appearance. That doesn't mean turning up to a farm in a three-piece suit. It means dressing appropriately for the forum that you'll be attending. Um, be interested, not interesting. So it's not necessary to be the laugh a minute, A1 personality. It's more important to be interested in what your prospect, future client is going to be telling you. Um, Try to match their tone because people will be put off if you're swearing and they're not, and vice versa. If somebody likes a bit of blue language and you're being prim and proper, that may not go over too well. It doesn't mean don't be yourself, but maybe you can choose between the self you are around your grandmother and the self you are around your best mate from high school. Um, you can use appropriate humour. You can look for connections, people that you have in common that might make them feel more comfortable with you personally, shared knowledges and experiences. And another way to help someone relax with you as a representative is to overview the sales process or the analytical process that you'll be undertaking up front so that they feel a bit more comfortable with that. The next phase is the disturb phase, and it's often neglected. The reason is it's sometimes uncomfortable to point out to people problems and things they should be concerned about. And the other thing is that often the reason why they've picked up the phone to talk to you is because they already have a problem and they've disturbed themselves. But it really shouldn't be left like that because people do have a tendency to not look at those problems head on. It's a confronting thing to do, and it's only fair that they might have somebody to stand next to them as they really examine, what issues they have about their, in my case, business and the risks of their business, and to make sure that they really do identify the need and the consequences of doing nothing. Now, that doesn't mean you have to get all hyperbolic about it and overplay, because if your product is solid, you won't need to do that. Um, you use a combination of logic, but it does need to be some sort of emotional connection and concern about the problem. For example, if your building burns down, that might have certain ramifications around profit and loss and balance sheets, but more importantly, that might affect that individual's ability to enjoy family time, um, live the life that they've become accustomed to. It's really important to listen to everything that you're being told and to do a lot of listening, but everything that you learn in that phase, and actually every phase of this process, should be verified back to the customer. Now, of course, put aside any feeling that you might be embarrassed about getting something wrong. It's far more important that if you've made an error or misunderstood something, that your prospect, future customer, has an opportunity to correct that, to avoid, bad consequences. Now, with the relieve part of the journey, in my particular field, we do that in two parts because there can be difficulties with approaching insurance markets. So, and you may not be able to fulfill the vision. So, the first part of relieving that person and making them feel that they've received a solution is to present how you believe their insurance program should look at the end of this process. The next step there is it is time at a certain point to say, well, look, if we can fulfill this vision and it's within some reasonable cost parameter, will you be committing to implementing this program with us? And it's really important to get that commitment, because if you don't get that commitment, it may mean that you haven't relaxed them about your business enough, or you haven't disturbed them about the problem enough, and you need to backtrack and redo at least part or possibly all of those two stages. The next step is then they're focused on solving the problem and getting to that point where things are implemented. So you should be able to easily collect the information you need at this point. Every piece of information you collect does need to be verified back to that person to make sure that you've got everything right. The other thing is that if they are disturbed about the problems that you've identified, they may be quite keen to get all their insurance, in my case, put in place as soon as possible, and that isn't always tomorrow or yesterday. So you need to give them an idea of how long that's going to take and just manage their expectations around what the next step will be, and make sure you keep up to date with them with progress reports. And the next part of relieving the person or solving the problem is the reality of it. And that might involve some compromise because insurers aren't prepared to give the cover that ideally they want, but you get as close to that as possible. And really, you need to match your solution to their admitted needs. And there's really no point in solving a problem when they haven't admitted to a problem. Present a total solution where everything that you've identified is solved by your program. But I always like to include a compromise solution. So I recognise that funds aren't unlimited. So it may be that you say, well, we're not going to worry. If you wanted to compromise, maybe don't take audit insurance, maybe reduce a limit here or there to make it a bit more affordable. But be on the front foot with that, because people won't necessarily admit or are embarrassed to admit they can't afford the solution that you've presented. And, you want to give them some way to step back from that absolute position. Although it's important to ensure that you've demonstrated how your solution is competitive. So in my case, I'll always do a table of all the alternative offers from other insurers so that they can see, well, look, we didn't pick the most expensive option for you. We've actually done some shopping here, and so the solutions I'm recommending to you are competitive in the market for insurance. And also really try and simplify that solution. Now, obviously, there's a lot of paperwork that must be by law delivered with insurance, but a simple summary will go a long way. And with closing, the important thing is to be open to criticism of what your solution is, and try and identify in your own mind which phase is the concern. What hasn't been done? Was it that they're not relaxed enough about your business? They're not sure about you? In which case you could maybe suggest that they call some of your existing clients or have some of your clients call them, or some other strategy. Could it be that they're not as concerned enough about the problems that you've identified, in which case you need to revisit that phase and say, well, look, these are the problems that we talked about. You have a building, if it burns down, you lose, you need to be able to rebuild it. You won't have any revenue for 6 months. So, let's put something like that in place. But let them tell you what their problem is. And so then you can identify which phase you need to review. You might need to remind them to their commitment that you would implement the problem if you came up with a reasonable solution. But overall, closing should not actually be a very difficult or shouldn't cause a lot of friction if you have done the first three phases appropriately and thoroughly. At the end, when you've closed the sale and possibly when you've had your bill paid, always ask for feedback and ask for a referral. I'll talk about that more in a moment. This is just a little, I suppose, a way that I explain to others in the team the different field positions. I liken management, processing orders, sales, and marketing to the four positions on a rugby field, which is the forwards. The forwards hit up and get low risk meterage. Centres will create opportunities by receiving the ball and looking for gaps and creating space for the backs, and ideally the centre places the ball right on the chest of the one of the backs who flops over the line, and that's when things have done well, or they might need to run the length of the field, but certainly the gap has been created by those centres. The backs have scored, and then there's coaches. And my question to you is, which one of the four positions in a sales process are most similar to those four positions on a rugby field? And if you have a think about that for a minute, and then I'll reveal my answer. So, marketing is really about softening up opposition to your product and service, and gaining those low risk meters where people are a little bit more familiar with what's going to be happening and what you do, and a bit more familiar with your company, and really relaxing them about you. Sales is the role that creates opportunities, and but the biggest revealing thing is that the people who actually score the goals are your processing staff. They're the people that issue the invoice. They're the people that create the order for they make the till ring. And as a salesperson, or your salespeople need to be making life really easy for those processing people. There's nothing more frustrating than someone who does the invoicing, that they get a resistant customer. Says, oh, this isn't what I paid for, or, this, I'm not expecting this bill. That means there's a problem with the sales team. Personally, I like to make sure that I respond almost as a number one priority to any concern that my processing assistant has. To me, they are the key position. They may not get paid as much as the salespeople or the management or the marketing people, but they are the key position. They are the one that actually scores the points. Management, fairly obviously, is akin to coaches. Now, finally, with the new client opportunities, I'd just like to briefly touch on how it is much, much better to be proactive about seeking new opportunities than reactive. When people are calling you, they're usually calling you with problems, and they may be problems of their own making. In my case, in insurance, it's often people that have poor claims history and other reasons that make them unattractive to insurers, and sometimes they're very difficult to help. And I don't mind helping people like that, but I certainly don't want that to be the majority of what I do. And if I'm reactive, that's where you end up. They tend to have more unrealistic expectations, because if they're picking up the phone and calling to talk to other people, it could be because the people they're currently dealing with aren't very good, but it also could be that they're just difficult customers to please. You often find yourself over promising and under delivering. And, are they as loyal as someone that didn't pick up the phone and call you? With a proactive approach, you get clients that have less baggage. You're in a position to negotiate expectations, which means that you're in a position to over deliver. They tend to have more loyalty because they weren't picking up the phone calling you. You've been introduced to them, or you've found them in a way, and so they've it's not through disloyalty that they're talking to you. They tend to be more deal focused, and it also allows you to prospect up. So the concept of prospecting up versus referring down is that if you have an existing customer and you don't really discuss referrals, they're very happy to refer you to someone who they see as a father might refer their son who's just starting out. They're a bit less likely to refer you to someone who they really value, who maybe is a larger business. The more proactive you are about getting referrals and new client opportunities, the more likely your customer is to refer you to someone as a way of impressing them because they feel like there's someone more important to them rather than sort of referring you to someone who they're helping out with a favor. That's basically it. Thanks very much.